This past year has been particularly challenging and difficult. There's a sense of trepidation and fear that the entire world has lost its balance. And perhaps at the heart of that concern is that even here in America, the greatest country that has ever existed, with more freedoms offered to more people than any other time and in any other place in history, that what we have and who we are is in jeopardy. Over and over, we watch the partisan sparring match of utter indecency, with each side expressing glee when their opposing political tribe takes a hit, where politics is not shaped by principles, but mere personality and style. And, quote, owning the other side. Additionally, this year we've watched the enemies of Israel, a list that is growing with alarming significance, assault Israel's reputation, applying double and even triple standards against the Jewish state to the point of absurdity and insanity. We've also watched Israel's own introspection tearing itself apart, while it continues to be attacked and threatened. We've seen Israeli politicians, American politicians, vying for who can be the most outrageous in their rhetoric. And as we watch our political leaders collapse into their own iniquity, we witness disturbing levels of political violence, just yesterday from what I understand, paralleling an eruption of our own inability to conduct civil debate. We see people across party lines only capable of hurling invectives at each other, labeling and objectifying one another, rather than wrestling with each other's insights and knowledge. Moreover, we now live in what has become a widespread social acceptance of a sort of low-grade anti-Semitism, and in many cases, just a straight-up violent anti-Semitism acceptance. And this all on top of the homelessness epidemic, rampant gun violence, drug overdoses, youth anxiety and depression. The list goes on and on. In a year of such discomfort, such stress, such assault, what's a Jew to do? And here I take comfort from the fact that Rosh Hashanah is about new beginnings, about the reality that we are not trapped by the choices that either we or others have made, but that we generate the constant ability to choose anew, to make a different life based upon what we choose now. The prophet Zechariah asked the question for all of us, Ki mi vaz liyom ktanot? Who would dare to scorn small beginnings? So we stand here at what could be a small but earth-shattering beginning. It's time to return home. And home for Jews is Torah. And so I want to remind me, each and every one of us, of two foundational stories of which the rest of the entire Torah is really just an explication. Story one. The Torah begins with the one unifying power in the cosmos erupting into creation without having to do so. God doesn't need the world. God doesn't need creation, except that for God to be loving, for God to really be loving, God has to express love. And so there has to be an object upon which God can pour God's love. And so God creates an unrequired world in order to be able to shower love upon it, undeserved. And we as human beings, I want to remind us, are made in God's image. In other words, we are most ourselves, most godlike, when we find others upon whom to shower love and compassion and grace The truth is that the rest of the entire Jewish tradition, all of Jewish spirituality, is really just a riff on that first story. But then the Torah delivers another tectonic story. And that story tells of that same God who loves without desert. That God who showers the world with compassion, with chesed and rachamim. That God who also puts a thumb on the scale, that same God puts a thumb on the scale to help a small and oppressed people against the most powerful emperor in the world, the mighty Pharaoh. And so, it was as we marched out to freedom, and we've been telling that story ever since, God has continually weighed in against the pharaohs of every age. The path is not straight. The innocent are not always spared. But eventually the pharaohs come crashing down. Time and again, they come to understand that the language of freedom is Hebrew. And that we have been calling out since inception in antiquity, let my people go. And Pharaoh, after Caesar, after Hitler, after Brezhnev, all of them thrown themselves against our people, and every single one of them has failed. Yes, they did this at great, great suffering and cost to us and to billions of others, but the arc of God's universe inclines towards freedom. And the Torah reminds us that God's two core traits are to love undeservedly and to align yourself with liberation. This requires from us two things: hope and preparation. And so the Torah comes along and tells another relevant story, the story of a Joseph, a man who had 7 years to help a different Pharaoh prepare during 7 years of good times, of plenty, for 7 years of challenging times. We right now, this time, we're the anti-Joseph. We are now in difficult times. And the choices that we make today and in the coming year will shape how we reemerge into the light of good times that indeed will come. And so we must be mindful of the impact of our choices. We have to think with hope and courage and strength about the good days that are coming ahead and what we need to do now to make them happen. The great Jewish theologian and educator Franz Rosenzweig, he wrote, "At each moment, the future presents to man the gift of being present to himself. And so man may use his moments freely and then deposit them into the vast receptacle of the past. In the enduring process of receiving and using his moments, he is truly human, master of the present. For it is truly his if he is present." This day, this season, is an invitation to be present, to wake up, to attend to life, to not let the busyness, the exhaustion be an excuse for a lack of attention, for a lack of follow-through, a lack of courage, a lack of conscience, and to remind ourselves of the plentiful abundance that we do have. And I am here to remind you that there are many yardsticks to plentiful abundance. At the start, I'll tell you right up front that I fully support one of the conventional yardsticks of plentiful abundance, which is wealth. Money is fine with me. In fact, my job depends upon wealth and the generosity of those who have it. So I'm all in favor of wealth and money. But there are other forms of wealth that we need to remind ourselves of on a day like today that give our lives richness and meaning and resilience, especially during challenging times. If you are sitting next to someone who will hold your hand, then you possess great wealth. If you have the ability to take time and enjoy your time, then you have incredible wealth and abundance. 99.9% of the matter that constitutes the universe will never savor time. And you are that rare 0.001% that's able to say, you know, it's nice just to be sitting here. That's great wealth. And if you are savoring your loved ones and your time, you have an appreciation of your inner life. You have music, poetry, literature, meditation. Maybe even now and then you get to take a nap. That is incredible wealth. And it should be cherished. Relationships of love and caring, the ability to be able to use your mind, to learn, the ability to master and attain, to think a thought that you never would have thought before. These are all great forms of abundance, and not the least of which is the capacity to give. At a previous show I was a part of, I ran a special needs Hebrew school program. It was a great thing to have. It was made up of kids in small groups who were on various points on the spectrum and for whom the typical Hebrew school classes just didn't work. And as a part of that program, we had a buddy program between a couple of those groups and a class from the typical Hebrew school classes. And they'd meet up every once in a while, and they'd usually do like a holiday activity or project together. And what was funny, though, that it wasn't always clear to me, like, if this program was built in such a way that there was a benefactor and a recipient. Like, who was the benefactor and who was the recipient? I think that the typical kids usually thought that they were the benefactors and the special needs kids were the recipients in this relationship. But I'm not so sure. And I'm not even sure the special needs kids thought of it that way. Because it seems to me that on the surface, it might look like the typical kids were doing a service for the special needs kids, but it was the special needs kids who gave the typical kids a sense of what is most important in life. So who was really doing the greater service? And so the capacity to give is really unlimited. You can give a smile, a hug. You can give the gift of conversation, of listening, of companionship, of warmth, a compliment. There are gifts we can give that money can't buy. So we always have within our hands the kind of abundance that can change the world more than what we even know what to do with. Crossing party lines here for a moment. As I read about it and as I understand, two of our great recent presidents, Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, who differed on their policy program, but what they shared, from what I understand, was that when you were in their presence, no matter how bad things to be outside, you were in the presence of each of them of resilient calm and hope. In difficult times, we, like they, can offer each other hope and calm and strength. The great American poet and thinker Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "The gods we worship write their names on our faces. Be sure of that. And a man will worship something. Have no doubt about that either. He may think that his tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of his heart, but it will out. That which dominates will determine his life and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming." On this Rosh Hashanah 5786, I encourage you to worship hope. I encourage you to worship faith. I encourage you to worship love and justice, because in so doing, you will become those things. You will become so hopeful that your hope will shine into the world and inspire others, and together we will turn the tide on these divided times. You will be rooted in faith, shatul b'veit Adonai, that you will flower and blossom, that you will allow Israel and the United States to remain strong beacons of democracy for people everywhere and strengthening our people everywhere. You can become love, understanding that love is not some flimsy emotion, but rather the universe's most powerful force. It's what created the universe. If it is determined, if it's directed, if it's resilient and fierce, if it won't back down in the face of resistance. Our tradition teaches that love is stronger than death. So for God's sake, let's be loving. And we have to understand that the implementation of love in the world is through compassion on a human level, on a personal level, and also justice among people. So let us reach out to others here and abroad with compassion and fight for justice here and everywhere. Our God set the world in motion by loving without requirement and by setting slaves free. We're at a time to rise to our God-like nature, which is to reach out in love, generosity, and compassion, while also fighting for justice and truth. Shana Tova.